Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vet Chats, where we help veterans share their awesome stories and make the veteran community a better place. I hope you'll stay tuned to see how the new generation is continuing their service. Also, Vet Chats is now available on Reese Across America Radio. We will be played Mondays at 9 p.m. and Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. They have a ton of great veteran content that I know you'll appreciate. You can find them at Reese Across America Radio.org, iHeartRadio, and the Odyssey app. Thank you all for joining. I'm your host, Jenna Carlton. We have an awesome guest tonight. You've probably seen her because she's gone pretty viral with a few of her reels. She's also pretty big on TikTok. She is Air Force veteran Alessandra, and I just saw her request. Hey, Shannon. All right, I'm accepting the request. There we go.
Hi.
Hey, girl, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So good to see you. How was your weekend?
It's been good. It's been super chill. We just do the normal stuff, go to the gym, meal prep, hang out with our dogs. We're super, super low key.
I love that. I mean, that, that sounds more exciting to me than anything else right now. Just like a solid routine and taking care of yourself. There's nothing better than that.
Oh, I know. We're really good at seeming like super routine and looking good on the outside, but like in the house, don't get it twisted. We're a little bit crazy.
Well, you have to have some sort of release. I mean, you can't have all areas working on full force all the time, right? I mean, it's just not possible. Well, it's possible, but it's not possible to do that and also maintain your sanity, right?
Right.
Awesome. So let's get into it. So how did you end up joining the Air Force?
So I have my family. My father was from Mexico. He immigrated and became a United States Marine. I'm a second generation American. A lot of people don't know that, which I think is really, really cool. He had so much pride in becoming an American that his first thing about immigrating was joining the United States Marines. My mother was an Army brat. My grandfather was the first in the Army to work on computers. My sister was Army as well over in Hickam. She became a nurse. My uncle went AWOL from the military. He was the black sheep of the family. And then one of the only things for me was Navy or Army or Air Force, and I didn't want to do boat duty. I'll be totally honest about that. So I was like, Air Force it is. I just felt like it was my time. I wanted independence as well. I wanted to pay for college, but college is expensive, and I didn't want to be in debt. So that is one of the resources that I was like, yes, I'm going to jump on this. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to get independence, and I'm going to go to school for free.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking the other day, if I didn't have, me and my husband didn't have our GI Bills right now, how we would be affording to pay for student debt.
Absolutely.
It just seemed impossible. So I totally agree with you there. And so what were you looking for in the Air Force? Were you just sign me up, or did you want to find a solid career path?
I was flailing in college. I didn't really know what I was doing. I actually have a degree in criminal justice, and I have yet to use it. Most of my experience is in HR, human resources. As a government employee, I've been that for almost a decade. That's my field, and I like it a lot. So right now I'm going for my master's in HR, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I wasn't really happy. I was 21, I think, when I joined the military, and I was just like, it's time to leave the nest. I just want to be independent. And I did have a strong sense of pride for my country, and I was like, my whole entire family has served in some way. It's my turn. So that was my biggest thing, was, again, gaining independence, getting an education, and just serving my country.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a little later than most people join.
Yeah.
So when you signed up for 6 years, was it kind of intimidating to you at all to be like, all right, I'm going to be doing this until I'm 27, almost, 28? How did you feel about that?
I actually never thought about that until now. Yeah. It was just
good.
Yeah, it never really was daunting. It was just like, okay, well, there's a service requirement in every single contract, so that's to be expected. But I was just like, hey, we're going to play it by ear. I'm going to serve my country. The scariest thing, honestly, was worrying about basic and being on my own. I know it's probably shocking to some people, but at 21, yeah, that was the first time I'd ever really been on my own. And my mother and father had prepared me very well to take care of myself, but it's still super scary. Living on your own or living in the dorms and just being alone was, I think, the biggest hurdle for me. And then, of course, basic training. It was just like this big thing, scary thing, basic training. You know, you're going to get yelled at, you're going to get beaten up, you're going to just, it's going to be intense. But no,
Exactly.
I never got beaten up. I never got beaten up. That's not a thing.
Yeah, but it's just like this big question mark because you're only hearing stuff from maybe family members or,
Exactly.
you know, other classmates that have joined, and then it's just like you get there and you're like, oh, all right. But I liked how you mentioned being on your own and also like being lonely, because there's so many lonely points, but like usually you're surrounded by people, so it's weird, but there is a lot of lonely parts to it. Did you experience any of that?
Absolutely. Exactly what you mean. Like you're in the barracks in basic training and you are surrounded by, at the start, like 60 females. So you're never alone, but at the same time, you're not at home. You're in a situation where you don't feel like you have anybody there because you're in basic, you're in such a stressful situation. It's go, go, go. Sometimes you're doing 15 to 16 to 17-hour days. But then you get to base and you're the new kid. You're the odd one out. I'm not saying that people are mean to you, but you're still new. So there's this sense of like, I don't really belong here. Am I going to get along with my colleagues? Again, it's that scary unknown. So that, again, was one of the biggest things, but it's just another job. It's a different culture, but it's just another job because you're uprooting your entire life. And I think you and I can attest to the fact that the military is not just a job, it is encompassing. So you're training for your job, but your entire life and culture and view changes in the military. So that part is very different.
And there's so much, it's such a like high learning curve, especially showing up at that first command, because boot camp or basic has it painted as so intense, so and you and I were talking about this earlier, so technologically advanced, like you are going to be working on the most critical missions with the
Right.
most critical machinery, and then you get there and
Absolutely.
you're just like, wait, what? This is kind of a joke. Was there any instances where you felt like that?
Absolutely. I mean, in tech school, I was in Biloxi and I was stationed after, I think it was
I
Hurricane
was
Katrina.
in Biloxi. That's funny.
So we were there in the transition point between the hurricane and rebuilding. So my dorm was brand new,
Oh.
our our education center brand new. So it was incredible. We were learning some amazing things in a brand new state of the art atmosphere. So that part was very, very nice. But then you get to the base and you see that like some buildings are condemned. Our is it bioengineering? I can't, bioenvironmental. That building had people working in it and it was condemned. Our building had cockroaches like it was a normal thing. Uh, like there were some nasty bits that you just don't expect. Like you expect to be working in a really nice corporate office kind of thing. That was my concept of it. Like it's going to be a really nice building, really cool. It's not going to have mold in the walls. It's not going to stink. It's not going to have broken AC. It's not going to have cold, freezing weather during the winter. And we did. It was all of that. Like you can see the parts of the military where they invest and the parts that they don't, if that's what I mean. So if we're talking about aircraft like the B-2 bomber, that is where all the money goes, not much else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great point because you can definitely see like living conditions. That's kind of the last thing to get an upgrade,
Right.
or those tech school buildings. And so I was there in 2013, but
All
everyone
right.
just always talked about Hurricane Katrina, and I was in weather, so that was just like the biggest fascination from like rebuilding after all of that. So
Mhm.
that's fun that you were there
You
as
got a
well.
Starbucks. We didn't get that one. It wasn't open for us.
Yeah, they did have a Starbucks. I think that was the first Starbucks I ever went to in my
Yeah.
life. And I was like, I don't know what to order. I was so confused. But anyhow, and then so after that experience, and then how was your first duty station?
I worked with some really good people. I can't pretend that I didn't. My colleagues that were like senior airmen around my rank, my other trainees, I worked with a staff sergeant. He was absolutely incredible, super kind, super nurturing. He had transferred over from another career field, so he was a seasoned staff sergeant.
Mhm.
Again, my colleagues and other airmen were absolutely incredible. My leadership was not, and that again was something that I wasn't expecting. Like I had this idea of ultimate professionalism, of people that were going to just work, we're going to train you, we're going to nurture you, and then we're going to put you out there. And training was kind of a nightmare. Um, I had to learn from most of my colleagues that were the younger airmen. My higher NCOs didn't really care about it. I had an extremely toxic NCOIC, which we'll refer to as my character, Sergeant Macy. She is based on a real person, and she genuinely enjoyed being malicious to us and making our lives hell for no reason. And that was a big factor of why I chose not to reenlist. Yeah. And then leadership above her was very laissez-faire, very hands-off. They knew about it, but unless it got to like IG or EO level, they didn't want to touch it. They're just like, figure it out. So that was tough.
That is tough, and it's so sad how it can just take one person to really have that big of an effect on your day-to-day living, your happiness at work, and also just setting
Absolutely.
the tone for what's expected at
Mhm.
work, because it's so hard to have one person like that and it not rub off on others
Yes.
after a while. So was that something that you had an issue, like were other people starting to just not care because of that one person?
I mean, it's not that we couldn't care. We had a mission. We at the end of the day, it's not like I'm calling in sick to work today. As you know, that doesn't happen in the military. And even if you are sick, they're gonna pull you in. You know what I mean? So they do not care. The mission is always first. It's not about you. It's not about your feelings. Um, so my colleagues were, for the most part, super professional. They always kept their heads on straight, and a lot of their support is the reason that I was able to continue. But towards the end of my enlistment, and I'll be the first one to say this, I became a disgruntled employee. I became not fun to work with. I became a very unhappy person. And I think that really reflected in the last year of my enlistment, and it's really unfortunate. But when military leaders are talking about retention and why they can't meet their numbers, leadership is one of the biggest things that are going to cause that retention to just shoot down, because your leadership is what leads your military. And if you have really toxic leadership, what's our reason for staying in, you know? So that was again, unfortunately, one of the reasons that I just decided to separate.
Yeah, I can totally see that, because it's like if you don't see yourself in the leader, you're not going to be encouraged or inspired to, pursue
You
that
don't have
role, because
faith.
you just
Yeah.
see, either they're overworked, they have way too much responsibility. So there are reasons why they are like that.
Hmm.
And you don't want that. Like I never wanted to make E6 because I know what that came with, and I think if I stayed in, I would have been just fine staying at E5, because I saw what happened. It turned you
Yeah.
into either an asshole or just like such a stressed out person with anxiety and whatnot, or it turned you into like someone who's like kind of two-faced. I don't know. I'm just kind of,
Or you just don't care. I found
yeah.
that once people reached E6, you either became power hungry or kind of a jackass, or you just were like, I don't really have to work anymore. And I'm like, E6 is one of the most important transitory ranks from staff sergeant. Now you're in between the first sergeant to a master sergeant. You're right there. Like this is a very pivotal, this is a technical position.
Mhm.
So for you to kind of just like, I'm good. It was very disappointing. So I had the overbearing, super controlling, malicious tech sergeant. I had the tech sergeants that didn't care. And then I had tech sergeants that were out to prove something. It was just, I've never had a good experience with E6s. And it's so unfortunate. It really is.
Mm-hmm. And so how I found you was a skit you did about toxic leadership, and it was about PT standards and how kind of ridiculous it is. Could you walk us through that, because it was just so spectacular?
really funny because that I think is over 300,000 views on Instagram. That's my most successful one on Instagram. And honestly, I did it in my PJs. Like, I was just like, I for some reason was like, I'm going to make this skit about PT and how silly I think it is. And it just blew up. There's been back and forth about it. But the thing about it is when I was active duty, I saw members and colleagues being afraid of losing their job because of a tape test, which has no indication of actual physical health. And there have been military leaders that are like, yeah, it doesn't really do anything. They got rid of it for a while, and now they're bringing it back. So I know Army and Navy do things like neck tapes, which is more beneficial for the member. So if you're going to bring it back, at least make it beneficial so that it doesn't hurt our members. But I just felt like being like, this is a really silly standard, and it's affected so many military people, and then it just kind of blew up. I was able to find my niche, and ever since then I've been making military videos. But yeah, it's pinned on my profile if anyone wants to see it, but it's one of the most low effort reels I've ever made, and it happens to be the most successful one.
Isn't that funny how it works out? So I didn't realize that was one of your first ones.
Yeah.
Oh, so I mean, how long ago was that?
I would say at least a couple months. I can't remember. I had blue hair, so that it was a while ago. I would say at least 3 months, at least. But yeah, I just, like I said, I made it on a whim, and it just resonated with so many people. A lot of people have had really negative reactions about it, which again, we know as your term, I'm going to start using that now. The bro vets. I gotta start using them. Vet bros. I'm sorry, Jenny. Vet bros. That's amazing. I'm definitely going to start using that.
Yeah. So what kind of pushback were they giving on that video?
I think one of the most hurtful things is like people calling me fat. Or people saying that, like, if you're going to be fat, don't be in the military, and you don't need to look like a marshmallow in a uniform. And I'm like, if that is all you're taking from this skit, you're missing the point entirely. I'm not advocating for obesity in the military. We know that's a problem and has been for a while, but it's not about fat. It's about the fact that BMI isn't an actual thing, and the tape test isn't an actual scientific thing that we should be basing health and fitness on. There are much better indicators, like we have bod pods where you literally sit in it and it records your body fat and all kinds of things. Like there's so many better things. And then from that video, on the other end, you have members coming out talking about how they've suffered from horrible eating disorders, body dysmorphia, other mental disorders due to this, because the people that are telling them to lose weight within 2 weeks by starving themselves, which is an actual thing, they're actually being told this, they're having after consequences for years because of a tape test. And I think that's the majority of people that resonated with that. And they're like, yes, thank you. And then from there, I was like, you know what? I need to start sharing these stories because this culture has to change. We cannot have people being sick, having serious mental illness, physical illness from something so ridiculous. You know, we need to speak out about this. And my niche was born.
Yes. Yeah, I remember people doing saunas, like taping garbage bags on them in saunas before tests.
Hemorrhoid cream and saran wrap. That's what I got the most. Everybody kept saying that, and I was like, I've never heard of that.
Never heard of that one. Or, someone said, I drink Epsom salt. Yeah, anything to really flush your body, or taking pills to lose that water weight.
Oh. Epsom, don't do that. That can't be good for you. Don't do that.
It sounds like it would dehydrate you terribly. But yeah, so this has kind of created just so much more, and you're actually being reached out with more stories, and then you're doing skits off of those.
Yes.
And how have the reactions been to most of those?
So I find that my Instagram audience is a bit smaller. But the reaction to those have been great. My views have been pretty consistent. On TikTok, I think the average view for these military skits is no less than 30,000 views a video. So it's pretty, I don't understand it. I don't get it, but it really is resonating with people. And again, you'll have people in the comments that are like, hey, can I DM you? Can I tell you something? Can I share something with you? And I'm like, absolutely. If you feel comfortable, let me know. I will advocate for you. I'll share your stories. Because I think that's the most wild thing, is how popular it is on TikTok. And it almost freaks me out a little bit, because I've always wanted to be a creator. I always wanted to entertain people and kind of just do silly things on the internet. But now I feel like this is a creator with like a purpose. So I'm more of an advocate, an educator, and a creator. So it's a little bit frightening at first, but it's really amazing that I'm able to connect with people that I never would have before.
Mhm.
And some of these stories, and I know some people get mad about it, and I don't care, because abuse and mistreatment is still happening in our military today.
Mhm.
And I'm still going to continue to share those stories. So I'm just grateful that I have a platform to do that.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's go ahead and talk about that, because we wanted to highlight that as well. And it's something that I've talked about, which I think that the civilian world doesn't understand. You know, your skit, it's the first one pinned on her profile. If anybody wants to go check it out, it is showing, you know, you must feel so safe on the base. And then you show pictures of Vanessa Guillen, Denisha Montgomery Smith, and a few others that, you know, weren't safe on base. And it's happening today. We still don't have answers. There's a lot of cover-ups, and
Absolutely.
it's so important that we bring light to this. So yeah, how did you kind of discover all of this?
I
And kind of
started
yeah, go ahead.
I started just seeing things on the internet. When you start posting things with a certain algorithm, they're going to feed it back to you. And I started seeing Vanessa Guillen. I'd actually seen her on Netflix. And she's one of the most well-known from the cursed base, Fort Hood. I swear, I feel like that base is just such bad juju. There have been, I think, 23 deaths in 2020 alone. And it's probably gotten higher since then. So Vanessa Guillen is one of the highest profile murders. She was 20 years old, and she was beaten to death. The I keep wanting to say airman, but I think I don't know his rank. I'm so sorry. I'm not good with Army ranks, but he ended up ending his own life, and they ended up in prison. Sorry?
He a corporal, maybe?
I think so. I took some notes. Well, I took some notes. Specialist. He was a specialist.
Okay.
And then I don't want to even mention his name.
Mm-hmm.
But he ended up ending his own life, and I believe they also caught the accomplice, who was a female. And just terrible. 20 years old, never got to grow up. And you think you have, again, there's this misconception of reality when you join the military. You think that you're on a military base, it's super safe, it's locked down, you have to have this ID to get in. And one of the most amazing comments I've ever seen is that the military is no different from society. It is a microorganism of the society that we have. So you're just taking from what we already have and putting it in a smaller space. So to think that there's not going to be any crime is kind of misguided. But if you're 19 years old and you're joining the military and you don't know, and you don't think, oh yeah, I need to do this, or I need to protect myself, or I need to carry protection, you don't know. And it's the same for, I think, Lavina Johnson. She was even younger than Vanessa when she died. She was 19, and she died in Iraq, and the Army ruled it as a suicide, which, if you know anything about this case, there's no way. She had wounds like broken teeth, a broken wrist. She had a black eye, chemical burns on her genitals. It was horrific. After over 10 years, I think, her father, John, is still trying to get answers, and the military will not assist in any way. Denisha Montgomery Smith, her sister Brooke has her entire TikTok is dedicated to her sister, with millions of views on trying to seek justice for Denisha. And she was assaulted and found dead from apparent suicide in her barracks, and yet the people involved tampered with the CCTV footage. So there was just no footage of her dorm, I think, within 24 hours of her death. Same with Ana Basaldua Ruiz. She was the most recent one. She was 20 years old, and she was also found dead on Fort Hood after reporting sexual harassment. So there's a pattern here, of people who speak out and seek protection and follow their guidance on what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to report it, right? You have to run it up your chain, right? And yet somehow these young girls and women who are doing this are ending up dead by suicide. It screams cover up at the highest level.
Yeah, without a doubt. And a couple good sources for this are Combat Sexual Assault. They have an Instagram page, they have a TikTok, and they have if anybody listening is interested in learning more cases like this, she has a whole page with, you know, a lot of different posts on these people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and there's just something that it's just like the culture. Like, sure, it is a microcosm, but it's also, you know, a certain age group that is in the military, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a certain type of people. You know, when you're recruited, recruiters usually target low income areas. They recruit in certain schools, so it is a certain section of the population that are more likely to have had trauma, like childhood trauma.
Yep.
So then you put that, and then you add in the culture of drinking, the culture of bad habits, of putting mission above anything. So you're adding more stress, and then you add in the cultural toxic masculinity. You know, women weren't here before. You still have people like that, especially you know, in the Marines. You know, like, you know, it was better without females, and so it just creates this storm of yeah. So I can't thank pages like yours enough, or anyone who's speaking out about this and really getting the word out there. Yeah, so we plan to talk about that at the end, but I'm kind of glad that we got through it in the middle, so then we could end on like a higher note. And the next thing we wanted to talk about, how can I segue this? Was just like moving on after the military. Like, you're a part of that culture,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, what happens next? How do I integrate back into society without being too jaded about what I just went through, and also being hopeful for my own future?
Right. I definitely didn't have a plan. I was in a relationship with my boyfriend. We were not engaged. We weren't married. So we were living together, but I was on my own. I didn't expect any extra support from that. And where I was stationed, Whiteman Air Force Base, is in Missouri, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And the job applications are over like 100 applicants to one job. It was at the time very difficult to get a job out there. So what was available to me was the commissary or the BX, which was great. I was able to get right in. It's very low pay. A lot of people don't understand that. NAF or the BX, the pay is so low. But if you need a job, you're gonna take a job. Yeah.
Wow.
So I worked there for a couple months. I think it also depends on the cost of living. So NAF isn't required to pay at the federal level. If you're working in a commissary or in certain jobs, there's like a federal wage. For the BX, it's different. I think it's just the minimum wage of that area. So definitely be prepared for that. If you're a spouse PCSing with your partner and you want to work at the BX, or it's all that's available to you, you may find that the wages are quite low. You want to try to shoot for maybe working at the commissary, which has a federal level of pay versus a minimum wage kind of pay. A lot of people don't know that. So yeah, I was able to go from the exchange over to the commissary, and the commissary got me into the GS system. And ever since then, I've been working as a GS. But yeah, I was hopeful getting out of the military. I was ready for change, but I was also terrified because it's a culture. So when you're in something that is all encompassing, again, it's a job, but it's not. It encompasses your entire life. You know, now I have to worry about what clothes I'm going to wear to a job. I never had to worry about, I still miss that to this day. I miss my uniform because it was so easy. It was something I didn't have to worry about. I put it on and I'm good to go. Mm-hmm. And now I still am just like, oh, I wish I could throw on ABUs. You know what I mean? So that was definitely a difference that I missed. And then you do have a lot of camaraderie, and that you don't normally have in a regular job. You're kind of intertwined a little bit deeper than you are in like a regular 9-to-5 at a corporation. I'm not saying those people don't have friends and it's not, you know, a great community, but it's very, very different in the military, and it can be a difficult adjustment when you're getting out.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. And that was what I was gonna ask you. I mean, was it how did you feel like with did you keep in touch with people who are still in and then or like how was it making friends after?
I've never, I've always kind of been a social butterfly, so I make friends wherever. But I have a select few that I still talk to from Whiteman. I've mentioned my buddy Mills in a video before. He's fantastic. He was great. Some of my characters are based off him and another guy, Billy, because they just had this chaotic, amazing, incredible, positive energy all the time. They were such good people to be around, and it made work bearable. I talk to every now and then. She's actually a Florida congresswoman, Ana Paulina Luna. Yeah.
Wow,
So
how
I talk to
cool.
her. Yeah, I talk to her every once in a while. She's doing great things. But yeah, no, I still do talk to people every once in a while. It's just that's the thing when you PCS. You say that you're going to be friends forever and you're always going to talk to each other, but when you leave and you move, it's so heartbreaking because you make such amazing relationships and then you have to PCS and you have to do it all over again. And the people that you thought you were going to have in your life forever inevitably kind of just drift off. So I still talk to everybody, but not as much as I'd like.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so true. And it's like after the almost like third wave of friends or fourth wave, I would call them, it's like you kind of give up. It's just like you're almost numb. You don't want to get too close.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so you gotta once you get to the civilian world, how yeah, you kind of gotta like, remind yourself it's okay to be attached. Yeah, I can attach to other people, and it's all right. You're gonna be
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, but it's definitely a huge adjustment. It's an adjustment. You're like, oh, whoa, I can have boundaries now. Oh, whoa, I don't have to share this information. Or, whoa, you don't know that bit about me, so I'm good. It's like almost starting new. And that's another thing about PCSing that I've always really enjoyed is that you can reinvent yourself. It's kind of like starting over again. You know what I mean? Like you're not you don't have to be like a sociopath and be a completely different person, but it's starting fresh. It's painful, but it's a new beginning. So it's also kind of beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity and hope in that.
Hmm.
And how has it been with your federal job? Because a lot of people look at that as an extension of the military, but it's not always like that. There's some like key terms that are the same, but the culture is totally different. Would you agree?
I think, again, it's very similar to the military in where you are going to have great bosses and you're going to have terrible ones. You're going to have good colleagues and you're going to have some not so nice colleagues. I've had both experiences. I've had incredible leadership as a civilian and I've had terrible leadership as a civilian. And it's really unfortunate. But I think that's just the world. There is no perfect place where you're going to have everything that you want. You have to learn how to respond in that negative situation. And yeah, it's just a balance. But I think for me, the hardest part is being a spouse. My entire life has been following around my active duty spouse,
Oh,
and that puts my career in the back seat. It really does. And I think for a lot of independent spouses, that's something that they need to be aware of. Either you're going to follow them around for their entire career, however long they choose, or I know plenty of spouses in successful marriages that are apart because that spouse doesn't want to give up their career because sometimes you get into the GS system and it is cake. You have a great job in a great field, great pay, great hours, and you just don't want to leave it. So that is very difficult kind of navigating that hopping around lifestyle where there's not really much continuity, and that has been very difficult for my career progression, which is why I'm a full-time student and I'm trying to work on mine now that we're stateside, getting my master's, and I've got 3 jobs possibly lined up, so which is really, really nice. Yeah, so I'm still waiting to hear back from them, which is a great blessing. I'm so lucky, but it's difficult, and I hope that people kind of consider these things when you decide to tie yourself to a military member, that it is not always a glamorous life. It can be very difficult and it can be extremely lonely, and that's something that you should probably prepare yourself if you're thinking about becoming tied to the military as an active duty member or a spouse.
That's a great point. And have you found support with the MilSpouse community? I know maybe it's a little different, or is it different? Or maybe that's my question, being a former active duty and then being a military spouse.
I've had great friends that were military spouses and veterans as well. I don't think, no, it's a little bit of both. I don't think I have any different insight. I think for me, when it comes to issues with like my husband being gone or traveling, I'm just like, I get it. I was there. It's okay. But not all spouses are prepared for that. So I have had instances where it's like, my husband's going to be gone for a month. What do I do? And I'm like, hey, this is a shock. It's okay. You're going to get through this. You have help. You have support. This is just sometimes what happens in the military. I mean, in certain situations, you have spouses where their spouse gets less than 24 hours notice and they're gone. And they're like, what the heck is this? What just happened? And I'm like, this is real military. This is not 9-to-5 military, which both sides of the coin exist. But it can be, again, a very difficult transition point for young military members that have families. And they're like, I'm getting deployed in 3 months for 6 months. And your wife is like, I'm pregnant. So it can be a very difficult culture to navigate. And the only way that I can say is find yourself a good support group. Every base that you go to is going to have a spouses page, and I highly recommend that new members join that so that they have resources and they have a community where they're like, I need help. Base programs even have deployed spouse programs where they will help you manage the house, manage your kids, manage your lawn if you need help. There's so many resources that the military tap into that. I'm always about sucking the resources dry of the military because they're gonna take from you as much as they can. So why not do the same to them? I'm totally transparent about that.
And that's what they're there for. And sometimes they're often underutilized because people say, oh, I don't want to use them, or somebody else can, or I'm not really in that bad of a situation. So yeah, definitely use those. I think that is great advice. And so you mentioned that you were applying to new jobs. Are you thinking of staying in the GS system?
It's such a good system, Jenna. I mean, you said before we talked about it, you're a GS. I mean, there's so many benefits to it. So the GS system is, if anyone doesn't know, it's the general scale, correct? With their government scale, is what they say, government scale. And it's just a pay scale. It's a weird way to classify the job, but you can transfer your military skills into a government job and get paid twice as much for what you used to do in the military. And then you can also transfer your military service into retirement through the GS system, again, which a lot of people don't know. And you can buy back your military time so that you don't have to start all over again. It is a fantastic system, and it's great. Some GS jobs will pay you to move. Some may not, but there's so many good resources out there. And then if you are a veteran, you get to use that 10-point preference on your application on USA Jobs. And that is such a big deal. Like, I'm a disabled veteran. I'll be transparent about that. I use my preference every single time. I use my spouse preference every single time. So it's incredibly helpful. If you are trying to get a job, you don't know where to go, USA Jobs is a really good way to start. It teaches you how to build your entire profile. It teaches you how to load stuff in. The application process is a bit different. It's a bit more lengthy, like they have you take assessments and all like that based on the job. But if you can get into the GS system, I recommend it. I definitely do. It's again, I've been a GS civilian now, I think, for almost 10 years. So I like it.
Yeah. And
it gives you room to promote. You have room to promote and grow, which is really, really nice.
And kind of speaking of that, when you're looking at these job listings, what would you recommend people do? It's kind of like confusing, like people they don't get, like a lot of them say for GS7 to GS10, how would you advise them to navigate job postings?
So that is a difficult one too. So a lot of times it's based on your rank. So as like a senior airman, I qualified as like a GS3, 4. That's kind of more entry level. Typically that's where it starts. So like for the commissary, for example, I think that was a GS4 scale. So you're talking about entry level position. If you're like a staff sergeant or a tech, you can qualify for 9s, 7s, 9s, 10s. If you've been a master, senior, or chief, you're at the top of the scale, 11, 12, 13, 15s. So it depends on your experience and your education. Obviously, if you have a college degree, that's going to bump you up to 6, 7, 8. If you have a master's, could be even higher. So it depends obviously on your expertise, your experience, your education, and your previous rank. And that is explanatory when you go into the job application process. It's going to tell you what it's looking for. It breaks it down. It's so easy, Jenna. It breaks it down line by line, what we want from you, what your duties are going to be, and what we need. So what I do is I've done everything from office automation to grocery work to program manager to HR. I've done it all. I've done it all. So you just put in where you're at, like for example, Whiteman Air Force Base, and it's going to bring up 6 pages of jobs, and you can click through those and see what your traits are applicable to, what is open for you. But it's so easy. Like what harm is it to like apply for 6 different jobs? You're probably going to hear back from one. It's so easy to do. So it's a very easy website to navigate, and I definitely recommend veterans get into that before they get out. Start job hunting like 6 months before you get out. Don't be like me where I was like, what do I do?
Right.
Don't do that.
Right. I was also kind of in the mindset where I'm like, the last thing I want to do is work for the military again. But how would you argue that kind of mindset?
So as a GS civilian, you're kind of in the military, but not. You're on the outside looking in, if that makes sense. So as a contractor or a GS, you are not bound by the same yes or no sirs as you are as the military. Your schedule is set. You work 40 hours a week, sometimes less, depending on how cool your supervisor is. Just like the military, there are some military members that don't work 40 hours a week, and let's not pretend that they do. So it just, you may also find that on the opposite side, you have a lot of military units that will try to take advantage of you, and that's something that people need to be aware of. Know your HR, know your point of contacts, know what you're doing when you're onboarding, and get your, what's that thing called? I'm blanking out on it. It's a list of your duties. There's an actual name for it. It's your PD. It's an actual PD, which says exactly what your list is and what your duties are, and you are not required to do anything outside of that. It's what a lot of civilians don't know. And what I love about the new generation of Gen Z is they're like, we don't do more than we need to. You know what I mean? And it's just like, well, don't you want to be a team player? I am a team player. I'm making sure everybody else does their own job, and I do what I'm responsible for. So it's called acting your wage, guys. We're bringing that into 2023. So you need to be educated before you go into a position. And just like the interview process where your employer is asking you what you bring to the table, you also have the power to say, well, what's your environment like? What is this culture like? What exactly am I going to be doing? How are you going to train me? All that stuff is important, and we need to empower ourselves to do that moving forward, because the military kind of prevents us from asking questions in a way. Like we kind of just shut up and color. Not anymore. You can grow out of that and grow up and use your resources and grow, if that makes sense, without the fear of being told that to just shut up and do your job. You know what I mean?
Yep, or the fear of retaliation. And you have to ask questions. You're encouraged to, and don't feel like you're bothering people. I know I often felt like that in the military, but you need to do that to know your job and to grow. So Alessandra, we are coming up on time, but I want everyone to know where they can find you, and go ahead, plug away.
Okay, so I'm on Instagram and TikTok. My handle is Alessandra 25 Ray. I have the same TikTok handle as I do Instagram. I made this platform kind of on a whim, but I want to advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves, whether they're active duty, veteran, or possibly thinking about joining the armed forces. I'm here to help you. I'm here to guide you in any way that I can. I'm here to entertain, but I'm also here to educate. So I don't want anyone to have misconceptions about the military. It's not all bad, but it's not all good. It's just like anything else. And I just want people to make educated decisions and I want to interact and meet new people and just be a voice for those who can't. And I hope that my page does that, and that even though some of my videos are quite negative, that it's just another way that we can understand the reality of what we're getting into, and that we can relate to each other, and we can just understand things a little bit better, I guess, if that makes sense. But yeah, I mean,
Totally.
I want to use my platform just like you do, to be a voice for those who can't, and to connect with other veterans and other active duty, and just kind of be a light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to find me, I think maybe like I'll leave a comment with my handle or whatever.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. But yeah, this has been great, Jenna. Thank you so much for having me on. This was amazing. I was super nervous.
No,
I feel like
I
I'm hot
really,
right now.
I
I feel
really,
hot.
I know it gets like sweaty if you got the ring light and everything. I feel you there. But I really appreciate you coming on. As soon as I saw your video, I was like, I gotta have her on. I gotta talk to her and share her with my audience. And speaking of that, thank you for everyone who has joined the live, or if you're watching the replay, or if you're catching this on the radio. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope everyone has a great week.
Yay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.